And I suddenly hear my colleague say to the decision maker, "Oh, you should book another date for training." And my stomach did a flip. I went, "You should book another date for training," and no question. I went, "Oh, that's exactly the polar opposite of what I taught her to say." Welcome to the Micropreneur Accelerator. I'm the Micropreneur Accelerator, and today's episode, we're going to talk about selling. I was recently in a breakout room where a person that I thought was very capable confessed that she really didn't know how to sell. And one or two of us were a little bit surprised because these days, to really have a business, you really need to feel that you know how to sell. And I'd like to say that I did start off with a little bit of natural talent. Enthusiasm got me the first orders. But after I discovered that I could sell is when I decided to make a study of it, not do a course on it, but really read the books and have conversations with my bosses where they would tell me things that I guess you just would never get in a book because it was real world at the coalface information. So asking for the order, a lot of salespeople, one of their mistakes is they don't actually ask for the order. And there's a couple of ways to do it. But I want to give credit to Stephen Schiffman, whose book, Closing Techniques, I would have bought more than 20 years ago. He's been around a long time. I might invite him on Manage Self-Lead Others for a conversation, my other podcast. But the one question, I suppose he calls it a killer question, the one question that you can ask at the right time, and if it is the right time, the person will inevitably say yes. And if it was the wrong time is when they say no or hedge away from it. And I'll tell you a story. Look, I have a training company, Brain Power Training, and there's a big bank in Australia called, one of the 4 big banks. And they did some speed reading training, and I had a salesperson that I was training up, and I had, not that I'd asked her to specifically ask the closing question during this post-workshop follow-up appointment. It was a face-to-face appointment after the workshop, and usually it's with a view to, can we do more business? I had taught her the closing question at the right time, which is, "It makes sense to me to pencil in a date for your training. What do you think?" Now, think about the construction of this sentence. It makes sense to me. So I'm not assuming that it makes sense to them. It makes sense to me. And then I ask a question, "What do you think?" So it invites a response. So they could say, "Oh, I'm not ready yet," or "Yes, that's right. Yes, we would." The next part of it was to pencil in a date. Now, depending on where you are in the world, that's a phrase that we use in Australia to imply a tentative booking. So rather than say to make a tentative booking, we use the vernacular, the informal, to pencil in a date. And that seems to be low pressure. And if they don't want to pencil in a date, they can save face and say, "Oh, no, it's not the right time." But you are asking for the order. And I only use that phraseology. "It makes sense to me to pencil in a date for your training. What do you think?" when I feel confident it is the right time and they are ready to buy. So I had taught my junior salesperson that technique. We hadn't discussed ahead of time that she would ask a closing question. I suspect I should have said, "Now, let me ask the closing question." You know what a closing question is? It's a question to which the answer is yes, if they answer the question. So in simple terms, if you go to a car sales yard and they say, do you want your car in red or blue?" And if you say, "I want it in red," it implies a yes, that you have agreed to sell. Or what day would you like to have this service? Do you want to come on a Wednesday or a Thursday? If they say, I prefer a Wednesday, it assumes they've bought. So, if you're selling winter sleepwear, you might say, and what color gown would you like to keep you warm? Oh, I prefer the purple one. Well, it assumes that you're going to buy. So that's a closing question. So it's good if you're new to sales to get used to some of the basic phrases. And I've now taught you the killer question, the question that is what I call the silver bullet. I mean, I don't mean to use all these killer bullet terms, but it is sort of fun when in sales, they say there are hunters and there are farmers. Farmers like to just really look after the account once the hunter has sold it. And the hunter likes to move on to the next sale. And to some degree, I'm a bit of both. I'm a bit of a hunter and a farmer, but I certainly have no problem with being the hunter salesperson, doing the occasional cold call. Although I must admit, with search engine optimization and websites and search engine marketing, marketing brings the people to you. But once they come to you, you still have to sell them, or someone has to sell them, and someone has to ask for the order. So we're sitting there and we're talking about the results of the last workshop and what they have in mind for the calendar of training for the rest of the year. And I suddenly hear my colleague say to the decision maker, oh, you should book another date for training. And my stomach did a flip. I went, you should book another date for training, and no question. I went, oh, that's exactly the polar opposite of what I taught her to say. And I saw the nonverbal response of my decision maker, who had been sitting forward in the chair because she was interested in us. And I actually saw her slump back in her chair, breathe out, and all the nonverbal cues were, I ain't working with these people. With that one use of language, my companion lost the deal, and it was almost in the bag. So think about this. I would have said, and I would have waited, because if I thought it was the right time, I would have said so, would have said it. Well, you've pointed out that you've got some issues with people keeping up to date with all their information, and we've already run a marvelous course with great results. It makes sense to me to pencil in another date. What do you think? And let the person decide for themselves. And all I'm saying is it makes sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to you. And look at the difference. You should. In written communication, in verbal communication, and in sales, I can hardly think of a time when you should say, you should, you must, you ought to, you have to, you need to. That is the language of command. It makes sense to me, suggestion. It's actually creating an arm's length distance between the person and yourself, and you're not pushing, you're nudging. You are asking for the order, but not in a very high pressure sort of way. Now, another way to ask for the order in a low pressure way is to just ask a generic, so would you like to take the next step? Because what does that beg? Well, what's the next step? That's probably the answer they'll say. Well, what is the next step? So you haven't committed them, but now they're curious, they're intrigued. So you're asking them if they want to take the next step. Or would you like to know how to take the next step? Now that's different to, would you like to take the next step? See, language is everything. Would you like to take the next step versus would you like to know how to take the next step is a much easier question to answer because, yes, I'd like to know how, but I'm not committing myself yet. Another open-ended way, it's not, see, that's a closed question where the answer is either yes or no. We talk about open questions. How would you like to move forward? Now that assumes, it is a closing question because it assumes they want to move forward and you're asking how. And so how in begs an interesting response. It's not a yes or no, it's a how question. And the typical opening words to open questions are who, what, where, when, why, and how. But probably more, how would you like to move forward, or what would you like to do to move forward? Just think that those are probably the two most common. So I'm going to leave you with that. You know, let me remind you that if you do wish to be part of an uplifting and inspiring community of practice and to support your evolution and growth, we will be opening up a mastermind in the months to come. And I invite you to join me in the Micropreneur Accelerator Mastermind. It's the best place to be. We're going to love it so much. We will have hot seats. Now, what's a hot seat? That's when someone they either want to describe their whole process and get feedback on it, or maybe they just want to bring up a roadblock or an obstacle that they've come across and they want feedback on it. Everybody will get something out of it. It'll include monthly calls over Zoom and maybe over telephone, but certainly there'll be 1 or 2 retreats throughout the year. And we're going to go to some lovely places, and it's going to be with great people that will be supporting you. So connect with me on LinkedIn or Facebook. Ask for my calendar to make a time for a 15-minute get to know. And during that meeting, you can tell me the issues you're wanting to solve first. Then we can see if the Micropreneur Accelerator membership is good for you. And check things out in the show notes. And please find me on LinkedIn and make a suggestion as to a topic you'd like me to cover. So until next time, bye for now.
Walk through life, every day is a new